The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. I am Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor, your host, and we are mid-conversation with Marie Lapidus, who was a police explorer with me who chose not to go into law enforcement. She is a college professor, and we were mid-conversation, and she was telling us about her college experience following the Explorer program. So, without further delay, here we go.
Eventually, I finally got a job at Spencer Stewart, who used to find the upper echelon of CEOs and VPs jobs when they would switch to different companies. And then I worked at Annixter, did the Y2K implementation. I switched to Caps Digital, which was a subsidiary of Leo Burnett advertising agency. That I worked there for a while, brought in computer systems. That was my job. Went to get my MBA at DePaul, got a part-time job out of the Skokie Review teaching at Oakton, and I was teaching all the Microsoft Office for continuing education like Excel and Access and all of that. Got hired to teach on the credit side part-time at Oakton. That's how it started my educational career. And so I taught at Oakton, I've taught at Triton part-time. At COD I did a stint for a semester, and then I finally got my full-time position at Harper College, teaching business, entrepreneurship, marketing, all of that.
Fantastic.
Long enough.
No, that's exactly what I want to capture. Not everyone goes into law enforcement. Just because someone was in a police explorer program doesn't mean they grow up to work in criminal justice.
No.
Doesn't mean that.
Not at all.
So one of the things that you said was that we were talking about degrees and that, pursue whatever you want because it's skills that you need.
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners the types of skills that you picked up as an explorer?
Did a lot of work that would be more police related. We did a lot of traffic control. We did some translating for the police officers because there were immigrants coming in and we spoke other languages. But I think what it did is build confidence. And mostly, I will say, being in a dominantly male-oriented explorer post, we at one point were an all-girl police explorer post, which I think was probably the only one around, if not in the whole nation, definitely in our area. The confidence it gave, the practice that it gave us of doing socially minded things, being aware, being strong, and I think was definitely the skill, just being confident and being able to speak up for yourself.
One of the things I really like about your career path is that explorers also taught, or at least what I learned, was service to others.
Yes.
And you are certainly in a role in academia where you're serving others. You're educating others.
Yes.
We were mentored as youths, and now you're in a mentor role, which is absolutely fantastic. This is very interesting. I didn't realize it was an all-girl post. Tell us about that.
I think you were...
I might have been the first guy.
After that, right? You might have come in after that. You were then came into our all-girl post. But yeah, we were an all-girl post. In the past few days, I've been looking back, and then now we're doing this, and I'm looking back. And I think that one of the things I realized is that I had been quite a feminist since I was very young, but I never called it that, nor did I acknowledge that as being a feminist. And I think being in an all-girl post was kind of one of those things. We were totally happy with that. Nobody ever questioned that. Like, oh, why do you have an all-girl post? Totally normal.
Happened to be.
This is how it is.
Can you expand on the program that you're involved in at Harper Community College?
I am faculty, so we have a business program. We teach. There's two kind of sides to the business program, which is different for a lot of programs at Harper, is that a business program is both a transfer program, so students like to take business classes and then move on to a 4-year school and then continue on their business track, whatever that they choose. But we also have what we call our terminal degrees, which also transfer. So they're not completely, but they're career degrees to get you prepared to get a job. I also coordinate the department. So I'm kind of like a chair, but we call them coordinators. So I get the responsibility of making sure that we have the right programs for what the community needs as far as career paths, HR, entrepreneurship, management, finance. We have insurance, social media specialists. So we have a lot of these tracks that students can take where they finish with skills. Most of it is more entry level, but it gives them the skills that they can do the jobs. And I will promote our insurance program was the first insurance apprenticeship program in the United States. Zurich Insurance and us at Harper and the Department of Labor. I'm very proud of that program, and we've been very good about having a lot of apprentices coming through the program and graduating and moving on through their companies and doing lots of wonderful things.
Is there any track for AI, which is the big buzzword these days?
They're working on that. That is in the career division, and they are starting that. So we have myself, and then with my deans, and we now have a director, started what we call the Idea Shop. It is a makerspace and entrepreneur center. And part of that is we offer for kids, we offer camps in AI during the summer. And then we also have CE, continuing education program in AI. And they are in the process of potentially developing that into a credit program. So the image of Harper should be kind of the AI hub. As you need AI skills, we will have classes for you.
Fantastic.
From little kids to adults. So as you have interest in that.
You may see me in some of those classes. I'm very interested in seeing how that interacts with business. The one thing I'm concerned about is I don't want to appear to be the old man in the class.
So you wouldn't be. The continuing education classes and our adult classes, I have students of every age. I have students coming out of high school, and I have students who are changing careers. I don't think you would ever feel out of place, because I have had students in my classes who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, taking classes and changing careers and doing something new. So I don't think you'd ever feel that way. Community college, in that respect, is really welcoming to all ages. I think when you look at universities, it's a little bit more difficult to be an adult student at a university. But for community colleges, that's absolutely not true. We have all different ages.
And if we have a listener who would like to, either they have children, they want to participate in the camps, or they want to learn about these types of things, marketing, business themselves, what website can they go to research and learn more?
harpercollege.edu. It's very simple. And then if you do a / for maker, you can read about our Idea Shop. I'm sure must be, if you do the search bar on our website, so harpercollege.edu, and you search for continuing education or fast track, business, just type it in there, and then I'll bring you to all our web pages for anything that you need to find. Or you can contact me.
And how would they contact you?
Email me at mfarberl@harpercollege.edu. M as in Marie, Farber, FARB as in boy, ERL @harpercollege.edu.
What final thoughts can you share with our listeners about how an Explorer program can benefit them as a young adult and give them some guidance?
I think the Explorer program was huge in developing my self-confidence, developing my knowledge of how the police side actually works. We've had a lot of people being very negative about the police. And having been in the police department, having gone through the Explorer Police Academy, learning about how things work, learning about how detective work works, and being around police officers they were great and they were very supportive. And I think that if you want to be in a program that supports you, guides you, we stayed out of trouble. I mean, we did fun things. Let's not kid ourselves, but we stayed out of trouble because we were involved in something that was great. We had fun times. We went to conferences. We had dances. It was fun, and you built some friendships. You had something outside of school that you can put on your applications if you went to college, or some people got jobs because they had these kind of experiences. We did a lot of socially conscious work, and we raised money for our trips. We went skiing and we did a lot of fun things as well. And we learned a lot, which I think we spent a bunch of weekends going through the police academy, and it was at Oakton College. And I found out about Oakton College through that. And then I went to Oakton College when I was at school to transfer my math credits back. And then I ended up working at Oakton College. Like, it was just an opening to me to even that existence that I wouldn't have had. I highly recommend it. Again, I will also point out the Explorer program was a Boy Scout program. The Explorers were the only part of the Boy Scouts that were co-ed and had girls. And I was always very proud to tell everybody that I was a Boy Scout. And kind of be like, see, you can be a Boy Scout and you can still be a girl. That was kind of cool to be a little different and still fit in.
Marie, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to our listeners about your experiences with the Explorer program. There's just a ton of successes with it, and you are one of them. Thank you. We are now going to pivot and interview Marc Hornstein, who is the retired Chief of Police of the Winnetka Police Department. He was one of the explorers with me who actually went into law enforcement. Enjoy! Marc was a police explorer with me 35 plus years ago and worked his way up through the ranks of a police department. Marc, thank you for taking the time to tell our listeners about yourself. Can you tell everyone, what is your origin story? Why did you want to become a police officer?
Good morning, Marcus. First of all, thank you for including me in your broadcast this morning. I appreciate the invitation. I'm happy to talk. Growing up in Skokie, I always did have an interest in police officers, and I just found them fascinating. Even as a kid, riding my bike around the neighborhood, you'd see officers, and to me, they were kind of almost like a superhero, if you will, when you were a kid from that point of view. At that point, for me to say that, I was going to be one, that wouldn't be fair to say. But I always had a fascination with officers. I would have to say that there was something that happened that was really profound and probably subconsciously pushed me towards law enforcement. This happened when I was in junior high going into 8th grade. And this was around the summer of 1983, where there was a woman that I knew who worked in a local grocery store. And she and her husband were victims of a home invasion and murder in Rogers Park. Their son, so while he survived the attack, he was victimized as well. And this was horrific. And I remember just being shocked by it when it happened and how awful and disturbing it was. And it really stuck with me. I think subconsciously there was a part of me that after that happened and I knew this woman, Joellen Puchel, it did something to me inside. And I think it really planted a seed for, is there something I can do in life that could prevent something like this from happening one day to somebody else? I think it kind of planted a seed. But again, even at that point, I didn't specifically know that I was going to become a police officer. It was just one of those profound moments in life as I reflect and look back on it today. Coming out of high school, or I should say towards the end of high school, coming out of high school, I had learned about the Explorer program. To me, it seemed like an interesting thing because it was access to police officers. It was getting a perspective of what they do, and then also an opportunity to be a bigger part of the community. So as far as getting into the Explorer program, that was kind of putting your toe in the water, if you will. Getting to meet officers, getting to see them as people, and getting to see that it wasn't just a uniform. There was somebody wearing that uniform. They had a personality. They had a sense of humor. They were there to help. Getting into the Explorer program was the very first step towards a series of steps that got me into law enforcement, in getting into the program, the idea of being exposed to some of the training that police officers had, and they would show us how they would do traffic stops, or they would show us how they would do a building search, and then having the opportunity to go on ride-alongs and see firsthand the types of calls they went on and the people they were dealing with. They were people they were helping, cases they were investigating. And it was fascinating. The whole thing was just kind of fascinating. But even then, I couldn't tell you that I for sure wanted to be a police officer. I just knew that the more I explored this, the more interesting police work seemed to me. Having said that, still wasn't definitively sure on what direction I wanted to go with a career. Enrolled in a local college, started taking general education classes, and then another student said, "Hey, I'm signing up for classes for next semester. I'm going to take this Introduction to Criminal Justice course. Seems kind of interesting. What do you think?" I'm like, "Hey, wow, that does sound." So I took my first law enforcement class at Oakton College. And then when I went through that class, that was really interesting. I says, wow, this is really neat stuff. This is real life. This is fascinating. I want to keep exploring this. Signed up for more classes. And then ultimately, one of my instructors in a class that I had announced to the class that they had an opening for a community service officer position in Buffalo Grove. So he goes on to tell us how this would be a great opportunity to see what it's like to work in a police department. And I said, wow, that sounds like a great opportunity. So I got the position. And I started there, literally working the night shift on the desk. And that was a real education because, in particular on the night shift, the types of calls officers deal with, the types of arrests they have, people that they bring in can be, shall we say, interesting. I would see how they would deal with difficult arrestees in the lockup at 3 o'clock in the morning and how they would handle that and the professionalism that was exhibited, dealing with different types of public inquiry phone calls that I would get from certain, people in the community, questions that I would be asked that I never thought I would ever be asked. Interesting to say the least. That transitioned into a full-time position with Buffalo Grove as a CSO. When I was literally doing the job 40 hours a week, that's when I determined, this is really what I want to do for a career. I want to be a sworn police officer because this is just, I enjoy helping people. The variety and types of calls that you would get day to day was interesting. I liked the idea of coming into work and not knowing what the day was going to look like. Didn't have that monotonous feeling of working in an office. So that really kind of excited me. So when I turned 21, I just started taking tests. I just wanted to be a police officer. I honestly didn't really put a lot of thought into where that would be. Whoever was testing on a weekend, I would go and take their test. And I tested all over the place and was just getting on lists. Sometimes you do well on a test and sometimes you wouldn't. There wasn't necessarily rhyme or reason to it. But fortunately, in 1993, I got a phone call from the village of Winnetka who had asked me to come in for an interview because I'd done well on their written exam and went through the interview, and they apparently were impressed with what I had to say at the time, and they hired me. So I started in Winnetka as a patrol officer in 1993. When my career launched in Winnetka, there's something that became a little bit full circle very, very early on. I told you a few minutes ago about the story of Joellen Huchel. When I got hired in Winnetka and they sent me to the police academy at University of Illinois Police Training Institute, and I go down there for training, and who's one of the guest instructors during my class was none other than Joellen's brother, Joe, who happened to be a police officer himself, and he just so happened to be assigned as a guest instructor to my class that I was down there, and I got to meet him. And to me, that was really a profound moment where subconsciously I think I'd been drawn to this profession because of what happened to his sister. I could have never guessed in a million years that in my academy class there he would be as a guest instructor. To be able to get to talk to him and share and express thoughts to him, learn more about his family, was really meaningful to me. It just seemed like everything came full circle in that moment. But as far as my career, I was really blessed to have worked there for just shy of 30 years, where I literally got to experience so many different things, whether it was working as a patrol officer, working in the schools as a DARE instructor, working with kids, working as a detective, ultimately being able to supervise the detective unit, sergeant, the commander position, deputy chief, and then ultimately chief of police. Was way more than anything I ever could have dreamed. I never in a million years would I have ever thought that I was going to have the opportunity to rise through the ranks and have the honor of serving as chief of police of that department when I started there back in 1993. So many relationships, so many experiences, so many wonderful, wonderful people that I got to serve, whether it was residents in the community, coworkers, professional colleagues from other departments, other organizations, was really very meaningful. And again, more than I could have ever asked. I got so much out of the experience between Buffalo Grove and Winnetka, almost 33 years total. Is just more than I ever could have dreamed of.
Remember when we were kids, you had 1964 FBI car.
I always had a thing for old cars. Since a young age, I always had a fascination with old cars. And that particular car was a 1963 Ford Galaxy, and it was ordered by the federal government as a government build, and it was actually assigned to the FBI and was used as a field car for FBI agents in the 60s. And I actually tracked down the history of it. It was a blast to own. It was a lot of fun. And the car was in really good shape when I got it. It didn't need much. And I just had fun with it for a few years. And ultimately, I had to get rid of it and sacrifice it just because of priorities change in the moment. Although now, in my current life, I've gotten back into it and just purchased something similar, a 1964 Mercury, ironically. I like those big old full-size Ford Mercury products from the early 60s. They're just neat.
I think that's awesome. Going back to the beginning of your career, what are some insights that you can share with parents who have children who would be interested in going into an Explorer program, whether law enforcement or another interest?
I think what Exploring does is it fulfills multiple needs. Number one, we all want to belong to something, whether it's a group, whether it's a club, whether it's an affiliation with a religious organization, whatever it is for you. I think we all as human beings have that desire to want to belong to something bigger than ourselves as an individual. And with Exploring, That's certainly one outlet of doing that. Puts you in with like-minded group of individuals who have similar desires to serve, similar desires to learn and to grow, give back. So I think it fulfills that need first and foremost. And then you learn. It's a way of expanding your mind, being exposed to things that you have not been exposed to before. If you go into it like anything with a growth mindset and willingness to be open-minded as to how and why things are done a certain way, I think it can help teach you certain disciplines. It can help teach you problem-solving skills, of course, structure, which I think most of us need in life, some degree of structure. But those would be the two main things that I think it would offer somebody. Not of course, not to mention just the specific information you get related to law enforcement, if you truly already have your heart set on that's what you want to do.
Fantastic. One of the things that you said earlier was you said it's kind of an opportunity to dip your toe in the water. And what I really loved about the program was there isn't a commitment. Just because some people get out of college, they'll go into a job, they'll discover they don't really like the industry or they don't like the job. This allows exposure to someone even before they select a major in college. For our listeners, Marc Hornstein is a mover and a shaker, and he's not in his retirement sitting on a rocking chair on the front porch sipping a mint julep. Marc, and I say that in jest. Marc, can you tell everyone what you're doing now?
A couple things is, I've served as adjunct faculty at Oakton College for the last 8 years. So I continue to be active there. I continue to teach police administration courses. I'm on their law enforcement curriculum advisory committee. So I continue to serve there. Then most recently, I've been fortunate enough to join a terrific organization. It's a Northbrook-based company called GovHR. GovHR offers a number of services, but one of the primary things that they offer is executive-level recruiting in the public sector. So, for example, if a city is seeking a new city manager, police chief, finance director, public works director, positions of that nature, GovHR offers full recruitment services where they'll go out there and try and find these elite candidates for the client, vet the candidates, conduct limited background checks, and deliver the top candidates ultimately for the client to make a decision on. I'm clearly working more so with the police chief recruitments, but it's a lot of fun. It's really interesting. It allows me to continue to stay engaged in this profession, continue to work with a lot of talented people.
Very good, very good. Can you give everyone the website in case they want to check it out?
Yeah, so GovHR, they do business across the country, done business in 44 states, and the web address, if people are interested more about the organization, it's govhrusa.com. So govhrusa.com.
When you were applying for the chief of police, and even today with your current recruitments, can you explain the process that you had to go through to become the chief of police?
In my particular situation, I was deputy chief when our chief had retired and moved on. At that time, the village could have gone one of two directions. They could have brought in a consulting company like GovHR and done a nationwide search. That would have been one option. The other option, and this is what they chose to do, was to name me interim chief for a period of time. And while I was interim, it was a matter of essentially being able to demonstrate that I was going to be able to effectively perform the functions of chief of police and more of a trial period. Also an opportunity for, at the time, the village manager and myself to get to know one another better and make sure that our skills were going to align, and they did, and that's how it worked out. And they took the interim tag off at that point, and I became the full chief. But a lot of times, if organizations perhaps may not be set up for appropriate succession planning, it makes a lot of sense to bring in a consulting company to at least offer the client options. There may very well be very strong internal candidates in an organization that are very capable of leading an organization, but by bringing in a consulting company and bringing in other candidates to pair or develop a baseline for a measuring stick, you can almost help affirm that, yes, the internal candidates that we have truly are the best, or it could be the opposite too, for where we know the internal candidate may require some additional development at this point in their career. Not that that person doesn't have the abilities to become a chief in the near future, but for now, it may make sense where they've got an outside candidate that may be the best fit at that particular point in time for the organization.
What final thoughts can you offer to our listeners about your career, about their potential careers, and about serving others?
I think that if you're interested in getting into law enforcement or even public service for that matter, you need to make sure you're getting into it for the right reasons. You need to be genuine as to why you're doing it. Yes, it's a secure job. It's one of the few occupations that still offers a defined benefit plan, such as a pension plan. That's all great and everything, but if your heart's not in it for the right reasons, it's going to show. It's going to absolutely reflect in how you're conducting yourself at some point in your career. So make sure that you're truly getting into it to serve, to care. One of the things I really tried to pride myself on was when I served was being authentic and trying to be compassionate and thoughtful when helping people, whether it was somebody who was in need because they were a crime victim, or if it was even somebody in the organization that was having a bad day, where I could try and be support. So get into it for the right reasons, willing to make that commitment to serve others. If you do that, and your heart is truly in the right place, I really do believe that the rest is going to work out. The professional success will come if you're doing it for the right reason. And there's a lot of noise out there, right? The last 3 years in particular, been some rough time, some criticism for law enforcement, and some fair and some not fair. I think it's important to try and tune out some of that noise and stay true to, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to serve? And if you stay focused in that regard, regardless of what the outside noise is, you're going to be successful and you are going to impact somebody's life at some point for the better. And you may not even know when that's going to come, and it may be one of the least likely scenarios that you find yourself in where that happens. It's usually going to be after the fact where you can reflect upon it and say, wow, I didn't even see that coming, and I'm so grateful that I was able to help this particular person during a really difficult time in their life.
I think that you gave everyone a view into the person behind the badge. I appreciate your time here in describing what it's really like, the real inside view, and you've had a wonderful, awesome career. And thank you for taking the time to be on the radio program.
My pleasure, Marcus. Thank you for extending the invitation to come and meet with you today and talk about these things. I appreciate it.
We have monthly concealed carry license, CCL classes, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.